down next to the laundry room. He kept to himself. He was quiet, except for video games that he played, a lot of war-type games and stuff, shooting and things, so. Never really seen him. He kept to himself mostly. I didn't even know if he worked. Because usually, you see everybody coming in and out from work. We didn't even know if he had a job or anything. We don't know what he did. But from what I understand, he wasn't that friendly. There was a fire in the building at one time, and he came out, and we were supposed to evacuate the building, and he just went right back in his apartment and says, "I'm not leaving," and he went right back in. So it was kind of strange, but he just locked his door and stayed in. My kids got all worried. They called, wanted to know if we were okay, Sad. It's a shame, that people have to do things like this. I'm all for freedom and all that.
Scott's attitude and personality definitely changed after the conflict with the newspaper company. He became angry, really angry. He had created different Twitter and Facebook profiles in the name of those he had thought had wronged him, including Eric Hartley. His personal Twitter feed was full of threats towards people employed with the newspaper, as well as the judge who presided over his case. He would tag different employees for the paper and tell them to kill themselves and express his hatred. Scott also expressed how much he wished the business would be shut down. He commonly would use the hashtag #CapDeathWatch. Scott seemed to be obsessed with his reputation and wanted to get back at anyone and everyone that had wronged him, or at least who he thought had wronged him.
The threats were sent over social media. We're trying to confirm what account that was, and we're trying to confirm who actually sent them.
Scott was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, 6 counts of first-degree assault, and 11 counts of firearm use in commission of a felony or violent crime, as well as other miscellaneous charges. After police performed a search at Scott's apartment, located in Laurel, Maryland, about 25 minutes from Annapolis, they found numerous planning materials for the attack. While there wasn't any sort of manifesto like others have left in the past, there was at least evidence that this attack was very, very planned. The day after the shooting, the Capitol still released a newspaper. In big, bold letters on the front page, it read, "5 shot dead in the Capitol." The opinion page of the newspaper was left blank, except for 4 words at the bottom of the page that stated, quote, "Today, we are speechless."
Something like this might happen in Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that, but you don't expect it to happen in a little sleepy office across the street from the local mall. But we're still putting out a newspaper.
An editor from the Capitol, Jimmy DeButz, tweeted just hours after the shooting, requesting that others stop asking him for interviews, and also stating that the staff give their all every day. He wrote, quote, "There are no 40-hour weeks, no big paydays, just a passion for telling stories from our community." In October of 2019, the day before Scott's trial was supposed to start, Scott decided to take a plea. In October of 2019, the day before Scott's trial was supposed to start, Scott decided to take a plea deal. He pled guilty to all charges, but not criminally responsible. This is Maryland's equivalent to the insanity defense. The courts must then have a, quote, "not criminally responsible" phase, which is like a small trial, but instead of finding a person guilty or not guilty, the jury will determine if Scott was competent at the time of the shooting. This phase was set for March of 2020, but due to the coronavirus pandemic was pushed back to June 2nd, 2020. After the Maryland chief judge extended an emergency court closure to run through June 5th, the trial was postponed again. While the attorneys prepare for this phase of the trial, there have been many different motion hearings to argue who exactly can testify at the trial. The prosecutor's team tried to get their own psychiatrist to interview the shooter, but the judge denied the request because the state of Maryland Health Department had already completed an evaluation that found Scott to be legally sane. Scott's defense team hired their own mental health expert to testify that Scott should not be found criminally responsible because of mental illness. The judge did rule that the prosecutors will be able to challenge the defense's psychological reports and findings. Because the judge ruled that the prosecution is not able to get their own psychiatrist to interview Scott, they asked if they could have a psychiatrist testify as to active shooters as a whole. Keep in mind that this person has never interacted with Scott or examined him in person. The judge ruled that the psychiatrist can testify if he thinks the shooter should be found criminally responsible, but he is barred from comparing the shooter to any specific mass shooter that was located in an FBI report that prosecutors were wanting to use as evidence. The psychiatrist can also testify about the data in the FBI report, but cannot compare the shooter to any of the shooters listed in the report. When this psychiatrist takes the stand, the judge will still have to make a determination if they are qualified as an expert before they can testify. The jury selection phase is set for December 1st through the 3rd, and the trial is set for December 7th through the 18th. Stay tuned for an update from Active Shooter, the podcast, after the trial is over. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving. A huge thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the music used in this episode. Check him out at darrencurtismusic.com. DARRENCURTIS music.com.
Active shooter. Reports of an active shooter. Active shooter.
Active shooter. Mass casualty incidents.
Make sure to check us out on social media. We have a discussion group on Facebook. Just search for Active Shooter, the podcast discussion group. You can also find us on Instagram at Active the Podcast and Twitter at Podcast Active. For just $1 a month, you can get access to ad-free episodes, early release episodes when available, and a shout-out on the show. Just go to patreon.com/Active the Podcast. Thank you, and be safe.
Every life has a story, and every story an ending. But he died one reason or another, and now they have this body that they're hiding. But not all endings are happy. And was given a severe beating, including having his head bashed into the floor repeatedly until he was semi-conscious. I'm Devil Dan. Won't you join us as we walk through the blue side of the mountain? Blue Side of the Mountain can be found on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and many more.